Hello, guys, and welcome to another installment in my project series where I dive into the processes that I went through in making project descenders in Miliastra Wonderland. And one of the processes or the things that I had to work on for this game is the character skills. Aside from the projectiles, which is basically the gun aspect, which we covered in our very first project series, we also have created several character skills for our character right here. I do want to show you how to create your own skills by showing you how I made some of the skills that my characters have. Like, for example, one of the characters or one of the element skills that my character have is Ball's Blade, which just goes like this. All right, so that's how it looks, and now we will go through the process into creating your very own custom skill. So let's get right into it. All right, so when you load into your game, the very first thing that you want to do is to go to the fourth tab right here in the upper menu, and it will take you to the player tab right here. This is your combat preset tab, and you want to go click on this third tab in the left menu right here, and that's where you see the character custom skill that we will be looking into for today's video. uh, what I want to show you for now is actually not Ball's Blade, because that deals with projectiles, and we've already talked about projectiles in a previous video. So I want to look into, actually today we want to look into Frost Barrage. All right, so we want to look into Frost Barrage right here, and that is um, also one of the skills that you saw earlier in the video. um, and it's basically another charge skill or an aiming skill right here, and basically it throws a consecutive cryo attacks at the place or at the location that you are aiming at. So it's gonna go have a charge attack animation like this, and then it will cast those icy barrage right on the location that you targeted it. So all right, so let's get to the basics first. When you first load into the character custom skill, you want to click on plus here, the new skill. Type in a name. Say for example, you want to do the Frost Barrage. Let's call it Frost Barrage like that, and then choose a location where you want it to be. All right. I'll just show you this just so you have a reference to what happens after. You could also put it in import assets, or you want to put it into another tab that you created. Since I don't have any, I'll just go into the import assets tab or a folder, and then it will be right there. So right here, it should show at the very end. Right here, since we already have a Frost Barrage name, it will show up with Frost Barrage underscore one. And the very first thing that you want to choose once you've chosen a name and click new skill is to choose the skill type. And we have 5 skill types right over here. We have instant skill, hold skill, normal skill, combo skill, and aiming skill. Now, Frost Barrage uses aiming skill, but we want to go through what each of these means. An instant skill, it's basically it triggers immediately upon input or once you press the button assigned to that skill. So animation editing is not available for this type. Um, you can add VFX as status tracks, which we'll get onto later, but it doesn't allow for animation editing at all. We also have a hold skill, which can provide skills with looping animation types. Um, Players can enter the looping animation by holding down the corresponding input or the button assigned to your skill. For the normal skill, this is the basic skill type, which most players will or most creators would usually use, is to use the normal skill. Um, this is basically when you press the button, it does what you tells it to do with along with animations. No looping at all. There's no hold animation tied to it. Next is combo skill. It can be configured as a series of consecutive actions. with transitions between actions possible upon receiving input at a specific timestamp. So this is more complex type of skill animation, skill type. Um, so we'll take a look into that um, later on, maybe in another video, because that would make this video longer than it should be. And we also have aiming skills, which basically this one is really helpful if you want um, to have a kind of like a crosshair, or like an indicator actually, of where your skill will manifest or be cast onto. So we'll take into like Frost Barrage uses this, which we'll get into later on. um, it basically puts your character into an aiming state when you cast this skill right here. The next thing that we want to look into is the basic settings right over here. We can enable fall protection, and when this is enabled, like so, the character will not fall off cliffs when using skills that cause displacement. So, for example, if you've added a displacement or a movement skill, or a movement animation to this skill right here, it will enable fall protection. It will not fall off cliff when it does the animation required for the skill to be used. Um, you can also enable allow cast in midair. So, say for example, if you were jumping, or you're airborne, falling from a cliff, or gliding, this right here makes it so that your character is allowed to use the skill. Um, so there's that. So you can turn this on or off based on whatever your character, or whatever the character skill um, is supposed to be. So you can do that. Next is the more technical part of your skill settings, which is under numerical configuration. Um, Now, you want to figure out if your skill, or if you want your skill to have a cooldown. Now, most people would actually want to turn this on, but again, it depends on what your skill is, or what your character is supposed to be. So you could turn on cooldown, and once you turn it on, it will allow you to choose a cooldown timer. Um, you want to set. So you could set for 10. That will mean 10 seconds. If you wanted to go have a cooldown timer of 1 minute, you have to put in 60, so on and so forth. You can make it as long or as short as you want it to be. Again, this is one of the key aspects of skills, especially in competitive shooters or in competitive games. And this is where the balancing of your skills will take place a lot, is in your character cooldowns, or your character skill cooldowns. So you can set it at 15 or 20 depending on how powerful your character skill is. um, Usage limit, this is the number of times a skill can be used. You can configure it if you enable it. So if you enable it, that means you can only use skill this one you can only use the skill once, and then it will run out. You're not allowed to use it anymore. um, You can set it to one or two or three. Basically, it's the number of charges that your skill has. So you will have, for example, if you set it to three, that means you have three uses of the skill, and then it goes into a cooldown timer. So the thing with Miliastra also is that once you use one of the charges, it will start the timer already. That's something to keep in mind when you're creating your skills, and that also goes for the balancing aspect of it. Now, if you want to use it once, or you only want it to be only used once, you could also just keep it off right there and there. Next is resource consumption right here. And to make it easier to explain, basically in Genshin Impact, your ultimates use this type of thing, the resource consumption, which are your energy orbs. So in battle, in combat, you would usually generate orbs, energy orbs, to fill up your ultimate abilities, or your ults. And once it's full, then you can use the ability. Now that is resource consumption. So this is very important, or very useful, if you want to create like very powerful skills that can only be used after your character in the game accumulates this type of resource. Now, once you enable this, you have to actually enable these. This will not be by default be in the game. You will have to create your resource types right here. I created two for this game. It's called energy. Phlogiston is one of um, the other types of energy that I haven't implemented, but I've used energy just like in Genshin. Um, and you have to actually uh, define this under resource or skill resource management. So if you go into the main tab right here, main settings tab, click on skill resource management, you have to create your very own skill resource. So you just click on this new skill resource, and it will ask you to set up some of these things right over here. So if you look at this, the energy right here, you are just setting up um, the resource that we want the skill to use. So, for example, you create a new resource. You call it whatever you want to call it. You can rename it to anything you like. You could name it energy, and so forth, so on and so forth. The growth type right here. Um, let's take a look into it. We have unconditional growth, follow skill retaining value, and follow skill not retaining value. So the growth that determines the actual growth rules when external logic attempts to increase the quantity of their skill resources. So you actually need to define the instances in the game wherein your character gains this resource. So you will have to you could define it as whenever your character attacks a target, or when your character takes a hit, it will increase the resource amount. So we'll take a look into that later on. But for right now, I just want to look into the different growth types. For unconditional growth, um, when not exceeding the maximum obtainable value, the skill resource amounts will grow unconditionally. So it will just keep um, growing until it hits the maximum. Right? Follow skill retaining value. So when attempting to change the skill's resource amount, it will only succeed if the character or the player currently has a skill that requires this resource. Otherwise, it will not take effect. So when no skills require a certain skill resource, the resource amount will be safe. All right, and then follow skill, not retaining value. Same rules as above. All right, so same rules as follow skill retaining value, but when no skills require a certain skill resource, the resource amount will be set to zero. All right, so you want to choose what you want. You could also use unconditional growth right over here, or whichever your character skill needs. And for the maximum attainable value, this is the maximum value of the skill resource. The amount of skill resource that a character can obtain cannot exceed this value. So if you set this at 100, your character cannot have more than that. So even if they keep attacking an enemy, given that you've set your skill resource increase to like when you're attacking enemies, if you've already hit 100, it will not um you will not obtain more of this, so cannot have surplus basically. So for our skill resource, what we need to do is to add under server node graph resource explorer. We want to add or we want to create new node graphs right here. I made two of them. You could also just make one, but I just separated it into two node graphs to make it easier to reference and to look at. So basically, I made two um, skill resource node graphs that will define uh, the instances or the events that will lead to an increase in the skill resource amount for each player. Now, I made two. The first one is called gain on enemy destroyed. So basically, whenever an entity is destroyed, or when we kill an entity in the world or in the stage, then it will allow for us to increase the skill resource amount. So what you want to do is to choose the event node called when entity is destroyed, connect that to a it's an event or execution node called increase skill resource amount right here. And then you basically just need to connect the damage source to the target entity right here, and that will lead to an increased value of 20 or whatever amount you set it to. You can just change it to 50 or whatever amount you deem is appropriate for the skill or for that one. And then for the skill resource config ID, again, you want to look back into um, the sandbox itself in Genshin Impact, and you want the configuration ID is right over there, and you just want to input that right here, the one that you created. All right, another one is gain on skill usage. So basically, when my character uses the skills to damage enemies or when attack hits, then it will lead to again the increase in skill resource amount, which you could set right here, so on and so forth. So when a character attacks an enemy, or when the attack hits an enemy, then it will do this increase to your skill resource. Or when your attack, so if you want um, the energy to be filled up when an enemy hits you, then you can set this one as well. So when attacked, event source entity is the target entity. Again, you want to reference the same skill resource config ID and increase by what value. And then when initiating HP recovery, again, this is just extra things just to demonstrate you what events you could use to do the skill increase amount. You could set this to anything. Um, Again, my preference when my character is healing, I want them to increase also the skill resource by a certain amount, because I have character skills that does healing, and I want that to be to also reflect gaining skill resource. All right, so once you've finished setting up the events or the logic that determines the skill resource amount increase, you have to make sure to go into the first tab on the left side menu here, still under combat presets, right? So the first tab here is under player. Choose your default or whatever player templates you have set up. Uh, Make sure to choose that and go to edit character on the right side over here and choose the force tab right here, which are basically the node graphs that are attached to the player. Don't forget to add the node graph that we just created to your player or to your character, actually, to your character node graph. So what you're gonna do, you wanna choose add node graph. I already have it here, but just to show you, you choose add node graph, and it will show you all the node graphs you have created thus far. Find the one that you created for the resource amount increase, or you can look it up if you have a lot like I have right now. It's pretty hard to look up, so I'm gonna look gain. So you see there were two, so choose the one that you want to implement. So gain on skill usage, you want to implement that, add it to your character node graphs right here. All right, so after we've added the skill resource management or node graph to our player, we want to go back now to our skill tab right here, and we want to look into the animation editor now. So, like I said, we want to look into some of the skills that I used or created for Project Descenders. One of the skills that I did is an attacking skill called Frost Barrage. Now, this will show you basically what goes into creating the skill. All right. So again, we've set up the basic settings in the aiming settings and all of that for our skill. Now we want to go into the animation editor. Now, when you go to the animation editor, you go by clicking here. It will show you this particular screen. Um, all right. It will. This will be blank at first. All right. And once you click on the number one right here, in the animation timeline. Since this is an aiming skill, there's only two animations available, which is one, a bow aiming animation skill, and two, a throwing animation skill. Now, we only, for this particular skill, we want to use the throwing animation skill. Now, for this particular skill, we want to use the throwing animation. And once you click that, it will display all the animations that you need. for this particular skill. So you have throw attack one, which goes like this, right? That one right here, the start and the end. And then the loop animation, which goes from here all the way up to here at the end. So it's just gonna go on a loop, right? As you can see. And you can actually change the duration of this loop animation. All right, so you can set it to 1.5, whatever your skill needs. And then it will go into the throw attack 03 animation right there. So basically, when you've released the button, that is what's going to happen. All right. So also make sure that your branch track is correct right here. So if you've added two charge branch tracks for this, um, you want to make sure that you choose for the response one, you transition to charge level one, and you transition again to charge level one for the second part of the animation. All right. So just make sure that you've set this up correctly, or else it will fail. All right. So after that's done, we want to look into two parts of the animation track or the animation timeline that we want to look into. The first one that's important is the node graph event, which then we will add node graphs, right? Event node graphs. And I will show you what's inside of this slow orb or this node graphs, all right? So basically, this is what defines what happens uh, during this animation timeline or during the skill, right? So, for example, for this skill, um, I placed this node graph right after you've released the button, right? So once you've released the button, this node graph setups what happens. What happens when you release that button? Now, for this particular skill, we want that to be defined as will cast a barrage of attacks. So what I did here is I made a node graph consisting of one instance of that attack, of that cryo attack, and I just copied and pasted it 4 times, so then it will be like a four instances of continuous cryo attacks, as you've seen in the video earlier on, right? So one, two, three, four. All right, so to get a better look at what the event node graph needs to be, we want to go ahead and go to the Miliastra sandbox editor right over here, and then our abilities, character abilities, are actually present not in the server node graph, but actually in the client node graph resource explorer. So you want to click on Window and click on Client Node Graph Resource Explorer, and then under character skill node graph over here, you want to go ahead and you can choose the uncategorized tab, but if you want to organize it, you can make an abilities folder. So in this case, I made one, and we can see here. Here's the node graph. You know, the purple box you see, or you saw in the animation timeline. This is the event node graph that we added to our skill. Now click on that, or uh, rather than clicking on that, you can also create a new node graph by right clicking and then creating a new node graph. But since you're already created one, we just want to look into what we added in here. All right, so inside that, you can see here, it might look complicated, but trust me, it's not. Let's just dissect it and see what's inside here. So you're going to start here with a blank slate, and you can only see node graph starts. What you want to do is connect that into, again, since we're doing an aiming mode, and we want the camera to be our aiming device, we want to add a camera orientation detection data, which means that wherever our screen or our point of view is looking at, that will be the target, right? So you add camera orientation detection data. You want the target type to be all except self, and our launch location, we want to attach, or we want to direct it or reference it by using get target attachment point location. And Again, target entity would be a self entity, so make sure to do that. So drag that out and select get self entity, and that will be your target entity of your target attachment point location. And then the attachment point name is where the attack will be launched. So I just use gi underscore focus anchor for that. And then the nearest distance is basically the nearest distance in which the attack will be launched from. So you want to set it at very low at zero point 0.1. And then the furthest distance is wherein, um, how far your skill can travel. All right. So we want to set that up. For the target rotation, that's okay. For the target location, this is important. We want to trigger a sector hitbox at specific locations. So go ahead, once you've configured camera detection data, you want to go ahead and click in the output pin and choose this execution node right here. And then you want the target faction filter also again to be hostile faction, because we want to affect enemies only, not our allies. For the location, we want to choose the target location. um, this is basically where our POV or our camera is pointed at, right? So use that as your reference for the location. Again, these are just damage numbers. You want to experiment and see how powerful you want the skill to be. I set it up at 25. You can set it up however you want, right? Again, damage increment, we've explained it before. Basically, it's what's added to the mathematical formula for the damage coefficient you have right here, right? It's a fixed amount. So if you put 100 here, so whatever is the result of the damage coefficient multiplied by your players or characters attack values, uh, it will be added to that. All right. And then trigger entity type once per entity. Hit scene effects, again, if you want to add VFX to when it hits the scene, not necessarily an enemy. So when it hits a wall or the floor, you can add a VFX. Not necessary. You can have it if you want to. And then the height and the sector angle. Basically, I've set it up to this way. Feel free to experiment. I set it up to this way, so that it attacks, um, you know, from the target location, right? So you have a target location right here. This is where, so in a 360 angle, so around that location, it will trigger an attack. All right. And then the height, how tall you want the sector hitbox to be. All right. The sector radius as well, I've chosen it to be 1.5. And then detection direction of sector hitbox from inside out. Again, these are sector hitbox configurations. So feel free to experiment and see how it will affect your skills. All right. So for this particular skill, I chose from inside out. Right. Only on hit hurtbox for our attack layer. And then our elemental type over here, since I'm doing a Frost Barrage, I want it to be a cryo element, so I chose elemental type cryo. Again, elemental attack potency, again, it will affect how powerful your elemental damage will be. And then your hit type could be default, could also be a range or smash or projectile. It will just affect how it hits your enemies, right? For our interrupt value, again, this is affected um, by your character's uh, interruption resistance. Um, Absolute damage, if you want to, you can add. Um, Now for our special effects, I've chosen this particular effect called on hit cryo standard. So basically, when it hits your enemy, it will display this VFX, so that just for immersion, I always try to add more effects, so that it registers whenever visually. It registers visually when your attack hits an enemy. So we have that, right? So knockback, if your attack has knockback, then it will do this, right? So hitbox on hit direction, and then so on and so forth. Some of these I've just left it as per default. No need to stress over it. This is a very long list. So really, just change and configure it uh, the way you see fit. Right. So basically, this is just for the damage numbers, right? And then I've added extra effects to the skill itself. So I wanted it so that after a character or an enemy player has been hit by the skill, then it will add a unit status. Now, I don't want to go and uh, explain or look into what the status is. It could be anything, you know. So for this particular skill, this basically just slows the movement speed a little bit, and that's all you need to know. Again, you can define whatever unit status. Again, this is optional also. So, yeah. So the application target will be the target entity right here. So that's a helpful um, correlation right here. So reference as well. So stacks, only one stack, and then the configuration ID of the unit status. Again, only if you want it. It's not necessary. And then I also added timed effects. Now this is where you see that barrage of attacks. So cryo, I've added the cryo ice cube shattered. So as you've seen in the video, um, once you've released the skill, then it will have that animation play out. You know, at that specific location. That's why I use the camera detection. So wherever you're pointing, it will be referenced over here, right? So that's where it will show up. Right, so that's important. Then I also added another timed effects, which is called cryo eruption, just to enhance the overall effects of the skill itself. All right, so feel free to experiment. There are a lot of assets and animations that are in the editor. All right, so that's all that I've added basically into our event node graph. Next, how we add a node graph that we created will be to right click right here and then choose add event. And then you will have here all the node graphs you've created thus far. Again, you can use the search function and find the event node graph that you just created. For us, we use the slow orb attack. So just click on it and it will be added right there on the timeline. And then you're free to move this around. Again, the timing is important for this particular skill. We want the timing to be after we've released the skill. So that's where I put it. And again, I just copied the event and then pasted it several times to create the effect of a barrage of attacks. All right, so the second part, or the second element that we have to add to our animation timeline to make it a full-on skill is the status tracks. All right, and status tracks are these green blocks in your animation timeline. You see that I've added several of those. One of which is the VFX playing. Again, to add this, you want to create actually extra status tracks, and you want to go into this area right here on the left side and then right click, and then you want to add new track and then new status track. Then it will create, this um, area right here where you can place more status tracks if necessary. So for this particular skill, I've added four status tracks, right? One is, or five actually. So one is VFX playing. So this is basically just to show a charge, animation right at the bottom, right there. It's not necessary, but it will enhance the overall effect or the overall visual of the skill. So I've added it right around here when he is charging or during the animation loop, right? So feel free to add that yourself, and feel free to add any that you think is necessary, or um, if you want to add a cryo field while you're holding the attack, you could add that too. Um, Feel free to customize it to your liking. The next status track that I added is show target effect. And what this does is basically, um, when you are trying to aim the skill, right? Since this is an aiming skill, this basically shows you the area. It kind of acts like um, an indicator of where your attack will land. So this is very helpful. Um, to match the skill itself, I chose a cryo effect. It will basically show a cryo orb, like a very small orb, and then um, it will show where your camera is currently targeting, thus where the character skill will land, right? So I chose cryo effect, target faction, all except self, similar to what we did in our node graph, and the detection range, again, similar to what we have set up in our um, node graph to make it more consistent, right? So this is where the basically the range in wherein your attack will land. So wherever in between 0.1 and 6 meters, those is that is the range of this indicator will go to. All right. The next two things that I want to add is the aiming state, so that there's gonna be so that your character enters an aiming state right here, and then you can set up the FOV, so you can enable the secondary screen and see how it looks when you press the skill. This is the um, character POV or FOV that your character is gonna go to. All right, so feel free to set it up to your liking. You want it to be zoomed close or zoomed out, right? Camera FOV, and the pitch angle. Basically, this is how far up, or the angle in which your camera can be rotated while you're holding the skill. So you can set it to be as restrictive or as free as you want. All right. And then transition duration, you can set it up to be as fast or as slow as you want. I typically like aiming states to be fluid, so I enter basically a very low amount, a very low transition duration, so that it doesn't feel clunky um, to enter and exit the aiming state. And then again, allows interruption. Basically, if you enable these, right? So, say for example, interrupt skill by sprint. If you enable this, when your character sprints, the skill will cancel. Or if you interrupt skill by jump, if you enable this, then that means that when your character jumps, then it will cancel your skill. So I like this to be turned off so that there's none of that shenanigans. And that's all there is for the animation editor. Now we want to exit so that we will be able to, don't forget actually also to save this, right? Don't forget to click save, especially when you see an exclamation point right here. That means that it's not saved. So don't forget, save this. All right. Now the next step is to actually go into your player tab right here once again, and then under class, either you want to add it to your default or you want to create other class, right? For our game, we have a cryo descender basically, that will have this skills available to them. You can create that, or you can put it in your default character as well. Once you've chosen a class, right, you want to go ahead and go to the middle tab right here, and this is where all of the character skills will be placed. So by default, there will be nothing here. Now you either want this to be a normal attack, which is basically the left button, um, which I'm not going to. Um, you can add this to an active skill. Now once you've chosen um, now, these are the extra skills that your character will have aside from the normal attack, right? You can set up however many skills you've created for your character. For here, I have actually two, and then the first one and the second one right here are default skills that I will add to them. But that's besides the point. So we have, for skill one, by default it's at E or configured in your E button. Q Q is for the skill 2, R for the skill 3, and T for skill 4. Now, wherever you want to assign that skill, you want to put it there. So if you want to assign the Frost Barrage skill to your E button, for example, you want to click on the plus sign over here and then find the Frost Barrage attack that you just created. All right, over here, or you can, again, you can choose to search from here, or if you find it, it's over here, and then it will be over here. So now when you press E, that's already assigned to be the Frost Barrage skill, and it will show up in your UI as well. Now, don't forget to save, and once you've done that, you basically set up your character to have that skill, and you're good to go. Then, now to test it out, let's go to test play and see the Frost Barrage skill um, that we've set up. All right. So now I will show you. Once you press E, you want to hold it to aim, right? Yeah, as you can see, that's the show target effect right there. And once you release, right, that's when the barrage of attacks will take effect. All right, so that's basically all there is to say about how to create your very own character skills. Um, you can create a bunch of different types of um, character skills, and the process is basically mostly the same. The very important parts are or will be in the animation editor, and how you set up the node graph to um, have the logic that your character skill wants to have. So whatever you set it up to, that's you just want to put it in the right um, timeline, or the right place in the timeline, and it will take effect. All right, so have fun. Let your creative juices just flow, and hopefully this video helped you on how the basic process into creating a character skill is. So it will follow the same thing, it's just different node graphs, different status tracks, and um, different skill type as well. So have fun, good luck, and I hope to see you next time. I might release a mini series videos of how I created some of the skills, like the healing skill in my game, or the ultimates that I've used in the game, which are more complicated. But the video might be too long if I showed it to you in one place. So I wanted to show you um, one of the skills so that you'll get an idea of how or what the process is and how to implement the character skills in your game. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with, and see you all in the next project series video.